Hey, beautiful souls. Can I ask you something? Have you ever looked back at your life and realized the very thing you thought was breaking you was actually setting everything in motion? Not while you were living it, of course. You couldn't see it then. But what if you could step outside your life for just a moment? What if you could sit in a movie theater and watch your entire life unfold on a giant screen? You'd see the heartbreak, the victories, the wrong turns, closed doors, the moments you thought would take you out, the moments that changed everything. And I wonder, would you find yourself yelling at the screen? Come on, girl. You've got this. Get up. Don't quit now. Put on your big girl panties and get up. Because from where you're sitting now, you can see things you couldn't see then. You could see the puzzle pieces, and you can see that every challenge was teaching you something. Every setback was strengthening you, and every detour was leading somewhere. And maybe you'd realize that some of the moments that felt like endings were actually beginnings. Maybe you'd notice that every time life brought you to a crossroads, you had a choice. You could stay where you were, or you could choose a different path, a different response, a different future. And that's what Becoming Her series has been about. Learning to recognize the patterns, learning to see the puzzle pieces, learning to understand that your story isn't happening randomly. There is wisdom in it, purpose in it. There's also a blueprint hidden inside of it. And today we are talking about the catalyst, the moment everything started making sense. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Awakened Her. I'm Holly Key, the founder of Awakened Her. And if this is your first time joining us, I am so glad you are here. This is a place where women link arms, a place where we speak truth, step into our power, and rewrite legacy. A place where healing doesn't have to look perfect, and also where you don't have to pretend that you've got it all figured out. Because let's be honest, most of us are figuring out one day at a time. And around here, we celebrate progress, not perfection. And we remind each other that falling down isn't failure. It's getting back up that matters. And when one of us gets tired, the other links arms and helps carry her forward. That's sisterhood. That's legacy. That's Awakened Her. Hello, my sisters. Today is exciting, not because the podcast series is ending. We're just getting started on this Awakened Her journey, but because this is the final episode of Becoming Her series. There's been 5 episodes, 5 puzzle pieces, 5 steps that have helped us look at our lives differently. And today we are talking about the catalyst, the thing that shook us awake, the thing that made us stop and say, no more. Something has to change. Now, if you're wondering where today's title came from, Girl, put your big girl panties on and get up. Well, let me tell you, that's from my late Uncle Perry, and he was one of my favorite people in the world. We were a lot alike. We loved to make people laugh, and I believe I inherited that trait from him. He had a little sports car with T-tops, and whenever life got dramatic, which, if I'm being honest, happened pretty regular when I was a teenager, I would climb into that passenger seat and I would tell him all about it. Every problem, every worry, every crisis that I thought I was absolutely having and convinced that I needed immediate attention. And I just kept talking and talking. Meanwhile, he's driving, smiling, listening, and probably thinking, Lord, this child is wearing me out. But he never made me feel like my feelings didn't matter. He listened. He let me get it all out. And then he looked over at me with that big grin on his face, and he would say, don't sweat the small girl, don't sweat the small things. You've got this. Put your big girl panties on and get up." And then he'd laugh and he'd say, "Come on, let's shake it off." He'd crank that music up in his car, and I remember leaning my head back, the wind blowing through my hair, the music blaring, and looking over, seeing the sun reflect off his bald head while he sat there grinning from ear to ear. And for a moment, it looked like he didn't have a worry in the world. Everything felt lighter, everything felt possible. And looking back now, I realize he wasn't teaching me to ignore my feelings. He was teaching me resilience. He was teaching me that hard moments don't last forever. He was teaching me that life is going to knock me down sometimes, but I could get back up. What neither of us knew was that those words would carry me through some of the hardest seasons of my life. And little did I know, the next time those words would mean everything to me would come from a phone call I never expected to be the last. Years later, I was working as a waitress here on the beach. I was a single mom, working hard, trying to provide, trying to keep everything together. And if I'm being honest, I thought being a good provider was what mattered most. I was working long hours, taking care of responsibilities, checking things off the list, doing what I thought I was supposed to do. One night around 10 o'clock on my shift, my cell phone rang. It was my uncle, and he was in the hospital recovering from surgery. Everything seemed to be going well. The surgery had gone well. Everybody thought he was getting better. Everybody expected him to be coming home soon. I remember asking my manager if I could step outside for a minute and take the call. Standing outside under the streetlight at the restaurant, I had no idea that I was about to have the last conversation that I would ever have with him. And that's how life works sometimes. We think there'll be another conversation, another holiday, another visit, another opportunity to say the things that we want to say. But we're not promised that. That night, he told me he loved me. He told me that he was so proud of me. And those words mattered more to me than I now than they ever did then. Because he didn't wait until it was too late. He didn't assume that I already knew. He said it. And before we hung up, he reminded me one more time. That same phrase he had been telling me for years. I was probably telling him how exhausted I was, and then he reminded me once again, "Girl, put on your big girl panties and get up." And we just laughed, just like we always did. And when the call ended, I went back to work, thinking I would talk to him in a few days. But I didn't. A few days later, I got the call. He was gone. I remember feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. That kind of grief doesn't even feel real at first. The kind where your mind knows it happened, but your heart hasn't caught up yet. And then our family asked me to speak at his funeral. To this day, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I worked my shift until midnight that night, and I got up around 4 a.m. that morning, and me and Cheyenne drove 5 hours back home. We walked into that funeral carrying a heart that wasn't ready. And honestly, I don't remember everything I said, but I remember one thing. I remember talking about that phrase that made me laugh as a teenager, that phrase that followed me into adulthood, and that phrase somehow became of who I am. And standing there that day, I realized something. My uncle didn't leave money. He didn't leave property for me. He didn't leave possessions. But what he left me was far more valuable. He left me a legacy, a belief, a perspective, a reminder that no matter what life throws you, get back up. And sister, that's when I started understanding something about legacy. Legacy isn't what people inherit when you're gone. Legacy is what people carry because you were here. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this with you today, because there are things people have spoken into your life that you've forgotten. Words that encouraged you, words that strengthened you, words that helped shape you into the woman you're becoming. Maybe it's time to remember them, because sometimes the very thing that carries us through our hardest seasons is something someone lovingly placed inside us years before we ever needed it. And as I was thinking about my uncle this week, I started realizing he wasn't the only person who left fingerprints on my life. My grandparents did too. You know, when you're young, you don't realize you're watching legacy happen right in front of you. You think you're just living life. You think you're just sitting at the dinner table. You think you're just spending time with your family. But years later, you realize those moments were shaping you. I remember summers at my grandparents', and my grandmother would dance around the kitchen while she cooked, teaching us to cook. And she was always moving, singing, always busy, and somehow always still making everything feel warm and safe. And my grandfather, he adored her. Even after all of those years together, 5 children, even after growing old together, I remember watching them renew their vows at their 50th wedding anniversary. 50 years. Can you imagine that? Even then, he still flirted with her. He would walk by and slap her on the booty, and I would say, Papa, Lord have mercy, you can't be doing things like that. But some things never changed. But looking back now, I realize I wasn't just watching a marriage. I was watching an example. I was watching love unfold before my eyes. And I was watching commitment. And I was watching two people choose each other over and over again. Years later, after they had both passed, our family gathered at the house. Everybody was choosing things that they wanted to keep: the furniture, the decorations, the keepsakes. And I remember walking through the house wondering what mattered most to me. My grandmother had already given me my grandfather's guitar years before when he passed. I used to love hearing him play in church, and I'll never forget her handing it to me and saying, "Promise me you'll never play country music on it." I started giggling at what she said, but she wasn't laughing. She was very serious. She had that very serious look on her face. So I took her serious and I told her, "I promise." Now, I don't have anything against country music, but when Mama Willis gives you an assignment, you follow directions. But what surprised me was what I found myself reaching for that day. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't valuable to many people in the world's eyes. It was their 50th anniversary keepsakes from their wedding. The ornaments, the decorations, the cake toppers, the little things were all sitting inside of her curio cabinet. I gathered them up and carefully put them in a box, because what I realized was I wasn't taking home decorations. I wasn't just taking home decorations. I was taking home a reminder of what love looks like, a reminder of what commitment looks like and what I have desired. A reminder that some things are worth building. And that's what I want you to think about for a moment. Who left fingerprints on your life? Who planted seeds inside of you? And who helped shape the woman you are today? Because not every catalyst comes from pain. Sometimes a catalyst comes from being loved. Sometimes it comes from being encouraged, or it comes from watching someone live a way that makes you think, I want that too. And when you start looking at your life through a lens, you begin to realize you've been collecting puzzle pieces your whole life. Now, let me tell you about another catalyst. Actually, one of the biggest catalysts of my life. Years before Awakened Her, years before songs, years before any of this, I found myself in a season where everything felt uncertain. I was going through a divorce, trying to protect my daughter, trying to figure out what would come next. And deep down, I knew staying where we were wasn't the answer. We needed a fresh start. We needed a safe place and a new beginning. What I didn't know was that God was already moving pieces around that I couldn't see yet. A couple of weeks before the court hearing, I was sitting in church one Sunday morning, and I almost didn't go, but I felt that little nudge in my spirit telling me to go. I felt like the Lord was saying, I've got something for you. The service was beautiful. The music ended. People started filing out. And I remember just standing there like I was waiting on something. Everybody was leaving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to hear something that day. Then an older gentleman walked beside me, walked down the aisle, and he stopped and he looked at me and he started walking again. And then he stopped and turned back around and walked over to me and he said, Young lady, God told me to tell you something. Now, y'all, that will get your attention real quick. He said, God has the most amazing surprise waiting for you. You can't even begin to imagine what all He has planned for you. And He wants you to know how much He loves you and to hang in there. And then He smiled and walked away. That was it. No explanation, no details, just a message. And at the time I thought, wow, that was nice. But it also gave me hope for me and my daughter, and I had no clue what was coming. A couple of weeks later, I found myself standing in the middle of that custody battle. Everybody told me it was going to be impossible to win. People meant well, but they kept reminding me of the odds. Holly, that'll never happen. Holly, don't get your hopes up. You're not going to be able to move that far. Holly, the chances are slim. You know what's funny? I've learned that sometimes the world's most impossible is just an invitation for God to show up. Because while everybody else was focusing on statistics where you couldn't move more than 60 miles if they contest, I was focused on faith. I remember telling my attorney that day, you do your job. I heard you were tough, and that's why I hired you, and I expect nothing less than your best. And while you do that, I'm going to sit out here and I'm going to trust God to do His. And I remember sitting outside that courtroom waiting, praying, trusting, trying not to let fear take over. And honestly, there had been so many nights before that where I had laid on the floor, crying out to God, not cute crying, not one little tear rolling down your cheek. I'm talking about ugly crying. Piles of Kleenexes beside me, face completely on the floor, completely surrendered because I couldn't lose my daughter. I couldn't give up. Something inside of me said, keep fighting, keep believing, keep going. And maybe that was the resilience. Maybe that was faith, and maybe it was both. But then my attorney walked out, and I will never forget the look on her face. She said, Holly, I don't know how we did it, but you won. You won everything. And she started telling me what happened. And he tried to contest. And not only had I won, but the judge looked at the situation and said, I have heard enough. And I am granting her the 300-mile move. And all I could hear was freedom, new beginning. Then he said something else, something that still gives me chills when I think about it. He said, I'm retiring this month. This case is going to be sealed and closed, and no one will be able to contest it. Jesus. Now, you can call that a coincidence if you want, but I say I serve a mighty God because while everybody else was looking at reasons it couldn't happen, God was already making a way. The sea had already started parting, the path had already started opening up. And the funny thing is, I didn't fully understand the whole picture right then. I thought I had just won this major court case. But looking back now, I realized I had experienced a catalyst. One decision, one moment, one door opening, and everything after that started moving completely in a different direction. That catalyst led me to Gulf Shores, Alabama. It led me to healing. It led me to Awakened Her. And it led me to this conversation with you right now today. And that is why I keep asking you to look at your own life because I wonder what catalysts are you looking at right now that doesn't make sense yet? What if one day you look back and you realize that wasn't the thing that broke you? That was the thing that launched you. Sister, I'm here to tell you those are called God winks. And when I looked at that courtroom battle that day, it became a doorway. What looked like an ending became my beginning and for my daughter. What looked like a crisis became a catalyst. And before I knew it, my daughter and I, Cheyenne, were loading up everything we owned. We were scared, but we were heading towards Foley and Gulf Shores, Alabama. I chose Baldwin County because it was the fastest growing county in Alabama in real estate. And I thought that would be a great place for me to begin my new season here in real estate along with my property management. We had vacationed here a few times over the years. We had no family or friends here that we knew of. We just stepped out on faith and a prayer, a place that would change our lives forever. Now, before I tell you what happened when we got here, let me just say this. If you've ever had one of those moments where God opens a door that nobody thought could open, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're standing in front of that closed door right now, don't give up. Never give up. Sometimes the very thing that looks impossible is already becoming possible behind the scenes. Now, let me tell you what happened when we got here. Because if you're picturing this beautiful movie scene where me and my daughter rolled up into paradise with everything perfectly planned out, well, that's not exactly what happened. We loaded up the car. I had great friends that loaded up the U-Haul for us while I closed out 4 properties. We said goodbye to everything familiar and stepped into the unknown. A friend was bringing a U-Haul down later that morning, so when we first arrived, it was just Cheyenne and me. A car packed full of stuff and a whole lot of faith. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning. It was dark, quiet, exhausting. We didn't know what we were going to be living in. And we pulled up in our new place. Now, remember, I had been a property manager for years. I had lived in beautiful homes. I had managed beautiful properties. So, in my mind, I had all kinds of ideas about what this new chapter was going to look like. Because God said He had something great for me. Well, I opened the door, y'all, my mouth dropped. Like 400 square feet apartment. 400. I looked around, I looked at my daughter, she looked at me, and I remember thinking, Lord, where do you expect me to put a lifetime of furniture? Jeez, my daughter, she wasn't impressed either. She looked around and basically said, Mama, I can't do this. And honestly, for a moment, neither could I. But I tried to stay positive for her. And we pulled out the blow up mattress, dragged a few things from the car, and we tried to get some sleep. But before the sun came up, I sneaked out and I found myself sitting out on the curb, crying Not pretty crying, not inspirational crying, just sitting out on the curb wondering, "What have I done?" crying. Whew, I remember thinking, "Holly, what have you got yourself into?" The next morning, I called my boss, and bless her heart, she listened to me panic for a minute, and then she said something that completely changed my perspective. She said, "Holly, it's not about the apartment. It's about the opportunity," she said. "You live in paradise. It's less to clean and more time for fun. So go unpack your boxes one by one. Enjoy the beach. And you and your daughter, you have a lot of healing to do." And then she said something else that stayed with me. She said, "Sell your things, start over, build a life with just you and her." Now that sounds simple, but at the time, it felt huge because it wasn't just letting go of furniture. It was letting go of an old life, old expectations, old identities, old versions of myself. We started unpacking one box at a time, one decision at a time, one day at a time. We started posting furniture online. People had already started buying things, coming to pick things up, and little by little, what had felt overwhelming started feeling possible. And by that evening, I was blown away. She and I were sitting together on the couch watching TV, exhausted, laughing, still a huge pile of boxes behind of us, but we were proud of ourselves. And something shifted, not all at once, but enough, because what had felt impossible 24 hours earlier had already became our new normal. And looking back, now I realize something. And what makes me smile is that little apartment became one of the happiest seasons of our life. We were grateful for. And at the time, all I could see what it wasn't. It wasn't this big house. It wasn't what I expected or a nicer apartment. It wasn't what I thought success looked like. But looking back now, I realize something beautiful. That little apartment that came with my job was filled with life. Friends, family came through and stayed with us. There was laughter in that little apartment, healing in the apartment, late night conversations. There were dreams born in that apartment. And there were moments that became memories I will carry for the rest of my life with just me and my little baby girl, Cheyenne. And the funny thing is, that little apartment became a catalyst for other women too. There were seasons where a couple of my friends that I loved very much found themselves wanting to start over there as well, trying to rebuild, trying to find their footing. And somehow that tiny little apartment became a safe place for them while they figured their next steps out. Looking back now, I think that's beautiful because what I thought was too small, God used in a much bigger way than I could have ever imagined. And maybe that's another lesson this catalyst taught me. Never underestimate a small beginning. Never underestimate a season that looks insignificant. What God can build when you're willing to start where you are with what you have. Because happiness wasn't waiting somewhere in the future. Joy wasn't hiding behind the next achievement. It was already there. I just had to slow down long enough to see it. The little apartment taught me something I will still carry with me today. The little things that matter most usually aren't small things at all. They're people, they're memories, they're moments, stories that we'll tell years later with a smile on our face. And honestly, if you offered me all the furniture back today instead of the memories, I would choose the memories every single time because what looked like the smallest season of my life became the richest. And sister, if you've been following this becoming her journey with me, I want you to hear that. Just because something doesn't look like what you expected doesn't mean it isn't exactly where you're supposed to be. Sometimes the places that change us the most are the places we overlook. Catalysts rarely arrive looking beautiful. Most of the time, they arrive looking inconvenient, messy, uncomfortable, scary, and sometimes they look like a courtroom. Sometimes they look like a heartbreak. And sometimes they look like a tiny little apartment and a blow up mattress. But if you stay with it long enough, I promise you will begin to realize it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You know, as I was putting this episode together, I started laughing to myself because I've shared a lot of stories today. My uncle, my grandparents, the courtroom, the tiny apartment. And honestly, I could sit here all day and tell stories. My friends will tell you that. They've listened to them for years. Some of them have gone home and told my stories to their families. They get a kick out of them. They love them. But not because my life is more interesting than anyone else, but because stories stick with us. That's how we remember. That's how we learn. And that's how we all connect. And then it hit me. That's exactly how the Bible teaches us too. When you really think about it, the Bible is full of stories. We remember David because of the giant. We remember Esther because of her courage. We remember Ruth because of her loyalty. And we remember Joseph because he kept going when life didn't make sense. And we remember Leah from last week because she spent years wanting to be seen. And we remember Jesus because he walked among the people and showed us what love looked like. Those stories stayed alive because they meant something. And that's why I've been sharing mine. Not because I'm trying to make this about me. I'm not. I'm trying to hand you a flashlight. I'm trying to help you see your own story. Because while you've been listening to mine, I hope you've started remembering yours. And I hope you started seeing the puzzle pieces and the people who shaped you, the moments that changed you, and the crossroads you survived, the things that you thought would break you, the moments you didn't realize were becoming catalyst. Because every woman listening has a story. Every woman listening has survived something. Every woman listening has a chapter that nearly took her out. And every woman listening has a reason she's still here. So maybe the question isn't, what is Holly's story? Maybe the question is, what is yours? Let's go back to the big movie screen right now. What would you be looking at in your life? What moments would suddenly make sense? What puzzle pieces would finally fit together? Because that's what a catalyst does. It helps us look backwards with understanding so we can finally move forward with clarity. We can't see it when we're in the storm. We can only see it when we come out. So when we're sitting here looking at our movie screen together, I want to tell you something that completely changed the way I viewed my own healing. Not long ago, someone said something to me that stopped me in my tracks. They said, "Holly, you're grieving." And I remember thinking, no, I'm not. I've experienced grief before. I've lost people I love. I've stood at funerals. I've cried those tears. I know what grief feels like. But then they explained something that I had never considered. They said, you're grieving the old version of yourself. And suddenly everything got quiet because I had never thought about it that way. I thought grief only happened when someone died. I didn't realize grief can happen when identity dies too. The version of you that believed certain things, the version of you that kept trying to save everyone, the version of you that kept overworking or kept settling or thought being strong meant carrying everything alone. That version of you that kept choosing survival over peace. Sometimes those versions have to go. Even when it's necessary, it can still hurt. Because here's the truth nobody talks about. Healing is exciting. Healing is beautiful and healing is freedom. But healing is also loss. You begin letting go of that, what once felt familiar, the old patterns, coping mechanisms, old beliefs, old relationships, and old versions of yourself. And there were moments during this journey when I honestly didn't even recognize myself anymore, even my friends. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever looked around your life and thought, who am I becoming? Why do the things that used to matter not matter anymore? Why do certain conversations feel different? Why do certain relationships feel different? And why does my old life feel like it belongs to somebody else? Maybe you're not losing yourself. Maybe you're finding yourself. Maybe you're not falling apart. Maybe you're shedding something that no longer fits. Because when I look back now, I realized I wasn't grieving because I was broken. I was grieving because I was changing. The old Holly wasn't coming back. And that's actually a good thing because she carried burdens she was never meant to carry. She stayed in places longer than she should have. She accepted things she should have never accepted. She thought she had to earn love. She thought she had to prove her worth, as I'm sure you do as well in situations. And somewhere along the way, God started showing me something different, that I didn't have to become someone new. I had to remember who I was before the world told me who I needed to be. And sister, that may be exactly where you are right now. You may think you're falling apart. You may think you're losing everything. And you may be. You may be standing in the middle of your chaos. But what if this isn't the destruction? What if this is transformation? What if this is the moment where the puzzle pieces finally start fitting together? What if the catalyst wasn't sent to destroy you? What if it came to introduce you to the woman you were always meant to be? Mm. Before we go any further, can I ask you a favor? If you've been following this Becoming Her series with me, if something in this episode today has encouraged you, if you've laughed with me, if you've cried or healed with me, maybe even felt a little less lonely tonight or today, would you take a second and hit that subscribe button and leave me a comment below? Not any bad ones. I'm kidding. Not because I'm chasing numbers, but because every comment, every share, every subscription helps this message reach another woman who might need it. Hit the notification bell to stay up to date. This Awakened Her community isn't being built just by me. It's being built by all of us. One story, one conversation, one sister at a time. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for allowing me to be real. And thank you for allowing me to show up before everything was perfect. Because Lord knows, if I had waited until I had all the answers, better lighting, better equipment, and everything figured out, we wouldn't be sitting here right now together today. because Lord knows I've had some difficulties with equipment. I need help with that. But you would have missed the journey. You would have missed the lesson. And honestly, so would I. Because some of the greatest things I have learned happened while I was still figuring it out. And maybe that's true for you too. Maybe you've been waiting until you're ready, waiting until you're healed or confident or have all the answers. But sister, sometimes faith looks like starting before you feel ready. I'm here to tell you that. I'm here to testify. Sometimes faith looks like showing up messy. It looks like taking the next step before you can see the whole staircase. And if there's one thing this entire Becoming Her series has taught me, is this: you don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. You just have to take that next step and trust that God will meet you there. And before we move into prayer, there's one more thing I want to share with you. This week taught me something that I wasn't expecting to learn. I've spent most of my life being independent. I've worked since I was 14 years old, making my own money to buy things I needed or wanted. I've always figured things out. I've always found a way. I've always been the one helping everybody else, if possible. And if I'm being honest, receiving help has never naturally come easy to me. This week, several people reached out all of a sudden and blessed me in ways I could have never expected. And I found myself doing what I've always done, trying to say no, trying to explain why I don't need it, trying to convince everybody that I was fine. People do look fine on the outside, but sometimes down deep there's stuff going on. And I knew I needed help. And that's the part that surprised me, because every time someone tried to offer me help, I could literally feel my chest getting so tight. I felt uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. I didn't know if I don't know if anybody else listening has ever felt that way. Maybe you have. Maybe you've spent so much of your life being that strong one that you don't know what to do when someone wants to be strong with you and for you. And maybe you've spent so much time giving that receiving feels unnatural. But this week, I felt God showing me something. He said, Holly, let people love you. Let people bless you. Let people show up for you. Because for years, I've been willing to help other people and carry their burdens. Why is it so hard to let someone help carry mine? And then something shifted. I realized receiving doesn't make me weak. Receiving doesn't mean that I failed. Receiving doesn't mean I can't do it by myself. Sometimes receiving is simply allowing God to answer a prayer through another person. And maybe that's what sisterhood really is. Not just linking arms when we're strong, but linking arms when we're tired. Not just helping someone else carry their load, but allowing someone to help carry ours. And I can honestly tell you, that's still something I'm learning. But I'm grateful for every person who has shown up for me during this season. Thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because they reminded me that none of us were meant to do this alone. And maybe that's the final lesson that I want to leave you with from this series, Becoming Her. Healing isn't about becoming superhuman. It's about becoming honest. Honest enough to ask for help. Honest enough to receive love. Honest enough to admit we don't have all the answers. And honest enough to trust that God will provide what we need and when we need it, often in ways that we would never expect. It reminds me of the Monkees, the band The Monkees, when they linked arm and did their little monkey dance. And as I see us sisters coming together in that community, linking arms and crossing one leg over in front of the other, that just brings me joy. Dreams do come true. Your life is on the movie screen. Make the right choices. Put the puzzle pieces together. And with that in mind, I want to do the prayer a little different today. Earlier, I was heading to an appointment and I felt led to pull over at a park and record something special for you. So, let's step away from the studio for just a moment and spend some time together. Well, it's prayer time, and I felt the need to just pull over at this spot. It was a beautiful spot, and I just wanted to sit out here in nature and pray with you today. And as I sat out here, I started looking at these trees, and there is no telling how many storms these trees have weathered, and they're still standing. And I believe that for you today. You are still standing, and I am so proud of you for coming this far on this journey. Like the 5 episodes, girl, I know that it has not been easy. It is not. But I'm here to let you know that we're going to continue to lock arms. We're going to link together. You got this. So I'm going to pray with you right now. Father God, I just come before you right now, and I lift up that woman and any beautiful soul that is listening right now under the sound of my voice. She's not here by accident. She's here by divine purpose. And Father, I just thank you that you are turning that pain into power. Father, I thank you that she has found this podcast. I thank you, Father, that she is remembering, that she realizes she's got legacy inside of her that she wants to leave. She wants to leave her mark on the world, Father. And I thank you that she has an amazing story. I thank you that she's going to touch so many lives. I thank you, Father, for her being my friend, for her wanting to listen to me. Because I know if you're listening, we are the same. I see you. I am you. And Father, I just thank you for your mercy and your grace. I thank you, Father, that even though we weren't worthy of a lot of things, you saw our worth. And you died on the cross for our sins. You went through it all. Obedience is better than sacrifice sometimes. You didn't want to do that. Sometimes we don't want to do things. But we have to push through. We have to be that resilient woman that we are called to be. And Father, I just thank you that wherever she is today in her life, show her the catalyst. Show her the puzzle pieces that brought her to this moment in her life. Help her to realize, to break those mindsets and patterns that need to be broken, Father, so that she will be able to move forward in power and might and not be afraid and be that strong woman that I know that she is. I'm so excited for her. I'm so excited for you and your journey. And Father, I just thank you that the healing that you've given me through this walk, and I know there's much more healing, but I thank you for it. I thank you for allowing me to be raw, and I just impart that into them that they can start to become real with themselves. Father, I thank you for holding her. You may have not have been hugged in a while. You may have not have been told that you are worthy and that you are loved, but I'm here to tell you, you are worthy to be seen. You are worthy to be heard, and you are worthy to be loved, and you are beautiful and wonderfully made. So, Jesus, we just thank you today. We are so grateful for everything, every little thing that you've put in our life, and for every person that has come through for a season, for a lesson, or a blessing. We see now. We see the whole purpose, and we thank you for that remembrance. In Jesus' name we pray. Be blessed, beautiful soul. You got this. Put on those big girl panties and get back up. Welcome back, beautiful souls. Last week, I left you with a song, Breaking Open, because I wanted you to sit with the message for a few moments instead of rushing off to the next thing. Today, I want to do the same, but not because I'll do this every episode, but because this feels like the perfect way to close the Becoming Her series. The song you're about to hear is called The Catalyst, the song that dropped after Fire in Her Bones. After everything that we've talked about today, I think you'll understand why I want to leave this song here. Before I let you go, I have one exciting thing to share. Now that we've completed this 5-part Becoming Her series journey together, I'm putting together the finishing touches on Becoming Her course and companion workbook. If you'd like to be the first to know when it's released, head over to my website, awakenedher.com, and download your free guide, Break the Cycle, your 5-step blueprint. That will also put your email on my list so I can let you know about the moment the course is ready. We're also going to start doing a weekly surprise for you. So I cannot wait to share it with you. Stay tuned for that. For now, I want you to sit with this song. Reflect your own story, the catalysts, the lessons, the victories, the moments that helped shape the woman you're becoming. Thank you for walking this journey with me. This isn't the end of Awakened Her. In many ways, it feels like we are just getting started. Transformation's on the way. I love you, beautiful souls. Until next time, stay awake, stay beautiful, and remember, put those big girl panties on and get up, girl. Take care. Till next Tuesday. Bye.
After the song finally came out, everyone probably expected me to feel victorious. Like I should have been celebrating, laughing, posting screenshots, smiling through congratulations. But instead, I was curled up in the dark, crying until my chest hurt. And honestly, I couldn't explain it at first. Because it wasn't ordinary sadness, it felt heavier, older. Like years of buried emotion, finally tore through the surface all at once. Like something deep inside me whispered, "You can't carry this anymore." The music left my hands, and suddenly the silence disappeared. Every word exposed pieces of me I had hidden out of fear. Old memories wrapped in harmony, tears buried underneath the sound. I thought I was creating art, but healing was what I found. And people heard me, not the version built for survival, not the smile I wore to protect myself. They heard the ache in me, the younger me, the lonely corner still trembling inside me. I handed strangers keys to rooms I was still learning how to enter myself. Maybe that's the reason I broke down, because my soul was finally uncovered now. No more hiding behind closed doors, no more disguising what hurt before. I let the whole world hear my pain, the storms I never learned to explain. And when the melody finally took flight, every hidden wound came alive. I cried because I was finally visible. And somewhere underneath all those emotions, I missed you. The one who once felt like safety, the one tied to so much of my unraveling and my rebuilding. You still existed inside the music, inside certain lyrics, inside the spaces between breaths. And once the song was released, everything inside me started unraveling too. Love, bitterness, hope, abandonment, mercy, grief, confusion, relief. It rushed through me so deeply, it felt like generations were mourning through my body. Have you ever carried pain so long that it started feeling normal? Have you ever lived in survival mode so deeply that you forgot who you were outside of it? That night, I realized I wasn't only grieving people. I was grieving every version of myself that had to disappear for me to become who I am now. And that truth cut deeper than I expected. I felt old wounds leaving my spirit, felt patterns finally start to break. Felt years of silenced emotion rise to the surface and take shape. Things I never knew how to say finally translated into sound, like heaven reached inside my chest and pulled hidden sorrow out. This became more than music, more than ambition, more than a dream. This became confession, healing, transformation. This was me standing defenseless in front of the world, saying, this is the sound of my truth. Maybe that's why the tears came pouring, because chains inside me were finally falling. Every hidden fear I tried to bury finally stepped into the open air. I let the world touch every scar, every fragile unfinished part. And when the music learned to breathe, so did the broken parts of me. I cried because I made it through. What if tears aren't weakness? What if they're evidence that healing has begun? What if falling apart is sometimes the first step toward becoming whole? What if this moment was never really about success? What if it was about freedom? So when you hear this song, and it feels painfully honest, uncomfortably vulnerable, completely exposed, that's because it is. You're listening to someone who finally stopped hiding their wounds long enough to let light touch them. And yes, it scared me. Because once your truth is heard, you can never fully return to pretending. But maybe that's what growth costs. Maybe healing trembles before it walks. Maybe freedom sounds like tears falling in silence after the applause fades. Maybe rebirth doesn't arrive looking powerful. Sometimes it arrives looking undone. And maybe this wasn't the closing chapter after all. Maybe this was the first time I allowed myself to truly be known. Not flawless, not guarded, not pretending, just open, just healing, just finally free.